My name's Mark Nicholas. I'm the CRO here at Bell Integration. I've got two guests with me today. I have Faisal Abbasi, who is our AI Services and Solutions Director, and Stuart McMinn, who is our Chief Technology Officer. And thank you for both joining me today.
Pleasure being here.
Hi, Mark.
So my first question is to Faisal. Following some recent NVIDIA events, what are the main takeaways that you've taken from those events?
Yeah, what I found interestingly in the recent events that I've been to around AI, particularly the NVIDIA one that was just recently done, they've made a shift towards the business discussions that we didn't have previously. So previously, NVIDIA really engaged and talked about GPUs, etc., hardware, literally cooling devices. And I noticed a sudden shift this year, which was focusing on the business outcomes rather than having those technical discussions. So I think there's been a shift in that direction, not just with NVIDIA, but if I look at the IBM events, when I've been to the Dell events, etc., and many others that we partner with, what I'm seeing is that directional change from moving away from those technical discussions that were really with the IT, and now the focus is how do we make AI useful within the business context, and how do we get the best ROI, the value coming out of those various solutions that either have been put into the organizations or are about to be put in. So that's a clear shift of direction that I've seen from Jensen and many others when they're talking about AI just recently.
Do you agree that we're now moving from the age of inference into more of an age of agentic? And what are the business benefits and potential risks associated with that shift?
So you've got about a couple of questions in there. So I'll try to break it down into, let's start with the inference conversation versus agentic. And I think it's really important to highlight the fact that inference is really a scenario where you have multiple inputs and you're inferring to what those inputs can mean versus true agentic thinking. And the reason why we were doing inference in the beginning was purely around the platforms that we had. So if you had a platform that couldn't deliver at lightning speed answers and get data from the source itself, you had to then rely on a series of inference to say, well, actually, what could it possibly mean? So now, if we think about the kind of platforms that we've got now and going into the future, we can do real agentic solutions, meaning that we can get the data right now instantly into the solution, analyze it, because that's where the machine learning comes in, and then respond more accurately. So the difference now is that we're able to do something that we couldn't do purely because we didn't really have the platforms or the technical capabilities to be able to perform in almost real time. I think if we look at conversational AI solutions in particular, there is a time lag that a customer is willing to accept. I think it's 0.02 seconds. And if it is that delay, it's fine. It's a natural conversation that you and I would be having. When that delay is longer, which it was because of the technology, the bandwidth, how much we could process in terms of a conversational type solution, that's not a problem anymore. So you can see that majority of organizations out there are now moving towards that agentic workflows.
Yeah.
And that's good to see, because that's what customers really want to see right now, is how do I take a normal use case and then put it into my customer situation and see what reactions you're getting back.
So the second part of my question was one around what's the risks associated with that?
So the risks are, what we're seeing is the main risk that we've seen with our own customers where we're deploying these agentic solutions is that lack of data. So that data not being available when we are performing the user testing or when we're performing the actual machine learning itself. And why does that matter? Because if you don't have data, what customers are now used to is having synthetic data. Now, synthetic data is great because it gives you an ability to move forward in terms of developing and deploying processes. But in reality, when you have the real data come on board, all that learning and training may be different to when the actual data occurs in the system itself. So the dangers are that if you don't have the data in itself, the final product itself, it doesn't adhere to the actual data itself. So that's one of the dangers that we've seen in agentic processing, is that it needs data available at its fingertips where it can make decisions in an instant.
Faisal, further to obviously the sort of the data being available, obviously when you're looking at agentic type solutions, you've then got that extra layer of governance, because the system can't be deterministic anymore. It has to then start almost thinking for itself and coming up with the answers for you. How do you see that as the risk in terms of these new solutions?
Well, there is absolutely, that is a great risk. If you're out there using open source solutions that are not tying into any form of governance or governance layers, you're going to have that problem. So you can take any solution that's open source, put it in, and it can do anything you want it to do. So there are absolutely no guardrails. But this is where we recommend, when we're dealing with our own customers or when we're engaging others in AI discussions, is to have governance at the center of your solution itself. Because if you're going to deploy this in banking or insurance or any regulatory situation, you need to prove that you follow the process and the guardrails are there in case the agentic starts to think on its own, which they are likely to do. So we do have sounds interesting. We do have solutions in our own portfolio, which we've called bot killers. So if a agentic bot isn't performing to the parameters, there are solutions to absolutely kill the agentic bot itself and spawn it again. So it is interesting, and that's done automatically now. And it sounds a bit like sci-fi, but
so you're proposing Terminator bots for our solutions.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. Yes, I suppose we could call it Terminator bots.
My next question is around NVIDIA's CEO, who is talking about a massive growth in demand, and in fact is even talking about $1 trillion revenue next year. What do you think can drive that level of growth?
Again, I'd say that's an interesting situation to be in, with $1 trillion worth of revenue to sort of hit. And I can imagine the pipeline that needs to be then generated to make that trillion in its first place. So again, as I said earlier, if you look at the shift in where AI is going, it's moving away from those infrastructure conversations that we were having 2 years ago, and then mobilizing the infrastructure almost a year ago, really now down to the business side of the equation. It's really driving those solutions, which are going to then drive the use cases. So what I envisage much more this year and next year is going to be putting those solutions onto relevant platforms. And again, if you listen to what Jensen's been saying, the first three things that he named just recently, solution-wise, were, I think it was 5 minutes into his speech, was the IBM solution footprint, the Dell solution footprint, and the Google solution footprint. So again, and those solutions are now needed to be able to then drive the next spending on AI itself, and then to ensure that the ROI is being returned in terms of machine learning and all the operations that sit behind it. So I can envisage much more software or solutioning going on, rather than just engaging about GPUs and cooling technologies. That was the case about 2 years ago. So I think the drive is going to be from solutioning and solution platforms that are going to be positioned to drive that kind of revenue.
So I think there's also an inevitability around it as well. So you've got at the moment is a lot of people spending money on technology. So that technology sits in the data center. It sits normally under the guise of IT, and IT don't have the big budgets in our customers. The business has that budget. So as the AI solutions, as they get rolled out to business, you're addressing a much larger pot of budget and a much larger environment to go and push those into. So $1 trillion now, it could be 3, 4, 5 trillion within a couple of years. It's about enabling that AI to be released.
Yeah, good point. And I agree 100% with you, particularly if we look at the personas as way that we see it. We're dealing a lot more with the business than we were before. So 2 years ago, a lot of the conversations that we were having, or workshops that we were doing, were with CIOs and their teams. That's really just shifted completely, having discussions with the line of business and the heads of line of businesses, etc., because they're now driving the AI solutioning. And I think that's a good thing, because it's the business taking responsibility for what they want and how they want to see these solutions helping their customers. And I think, and I feel when we're engaging at that business level, they have a great understanding of what they want, and with a little bit of education, what we have been doing with some of those heads of business is to sort of say, here is what you could have. And I think that has been extremely receptive. And I think that's where the industry is moving that direction, and possibly then to achieve, as you said, Stuart, not just 1 trillion, it could be many, many trillions.
Following on from that last question, how do you see the move towards AI factories, and what do you think this will mean for organizations?
So I think let's dispel that myth, what are AI factories? Because we've heard so much about AI factories. Everybody talks about an AI factory. And I don't think people understand to some degree what actually is an AI factory, right? So, and I'm not going to go into the purest definition, but just generally, it gives an organization the ability to then take their AI use cases that are being developed in either a POC, a pilot, or in a demonstrative manner into a full-blown production environment. So it's a place where you can access data super fast. It's the ability for an organization to say, well, actually, now we're ready to take this to our customers. And so that environment needs to be fully governed. It needs to have all the safety features put into place, because now you're no longer experimenting and no longer can you afford any mistakes. You're going into that situation. So technically, that AI factory is then driving a production-like use case within the organization itself. So what it means, so Mark, what it really then means, if we think about the definition of the AI factory, what it means, it gives an organization the ability to safely take that use case that is being developed from an AI perspective into a place where they can go, well, actually, it's now going to scale. And without that scalability, you're not going to get the ROI that you need to deliver on the time spent and the use case that you've developed with your customers. So it gives organizations this path to success. It gives the organization a sense that it's going to work when we take it into production, and there are no other issues around data or access of data, speed, etc. So it's one of those guarantees that you get when you have an AI factory.
Following on from that, the success we've had from meetings with customers across the Middle East, across the UK, US, etc., we've been talking to organisations around our process of accelerating those use cases from initial workshops through rapid prototyping into the sort of the production type environments, and helping people see what they're going to get and help them with those sort of governance features. How has that changed your approach as a delivery unit to actually go and deliver that AI solution to the customer?
You know, it's been, let's just say, if I use the word interesting, and an interesting journey, probably, and you've been with some of those journeys, as you and I both met many of those prospects now, clients and customers and so on. What I've noticed is a sea change of where we were to where we are today. So in the beginning, 2 years ago, and I say in the beginning is, talk about 2 years ago. 2 years ago, we had a lot of cognitive engineers, we had conversation engineers and so on. So, but all of that, with advancements of technologies that we've seen recently in AI, a lot of that's now prompt engineering. So you don't need all of the coders, the designers, because a lot of it is designed on your behalf. We're able to engage clients now differently to the way we were before, in the sense that when we're having a meeting now, we're able to, in 45 minutes, put together almost a prototype demonstration of the requirements that they want to see, which is always a surprise to our prospects. They go, oh, wow, you actually showed me what I needed to see. So with that series of advancements, technologies, how we've changed the way we're engaging those prospects, we're able to now move into what I could probably call the second or third generation of interactions with AI technologies to say, here's what we've built you in less than an hour. With a little bit more time, we can get to the next stage of its evolution. So that gives the business client, as we talked earlier about IT versus business, the business client's confidence to say, well, actually, I can see a lot of what I've just said, and now I can get to that point where the end product could look something similar to that. So I think it's changed the way we were interacting from 2 years ago to where we are today, and I think it's made a huge difference to the businesses who can visualize the final product as the way they see it.
I think the other thing that it's enabled us to do, and sort of from my development teams and I know from your development teams within the organisation, it's meant that we've changed how we are training people. So we're no longer training people necessarily to be all coders or cognitive engineers and the likes. We can create very different structures of teams and actually accelerate a lot of what we develop and a lot of what we deliver. Not only from a time frame, but also just from a bandwidth. So you can release a lot more features as part of a development drop. And it does mean changing how you set up your projects and programs. It's no longer just sprints. It's working collaboratively in teams and squads to actually go and output deliverables. So it is changing the actual delivery mechanism within the projects as well.
Yeah. I was going to add, and not only is it doing that, you're spot on, it's also changing how we deliver using our own platforms that we've developed. So like an MCP platform, that actually helps us to deploy much faster, much quicker. So where we've given previous estimates to be 3 months, those are now done in 2 months. So it's moving that deployment cycle much faster. That return, the ROI, which is the concern of the entire organization that we're dealing with, is much more achievable, much faster, much quicker. And that allows them to sort of go, as in our customers, to go even broader than they would have on certain solutions. So I think that's another advantage. And we've seen that with our own development teams.
I think it takes away single points of failure in terms of development teams as well. So teams now need to be multi-skilled. Yeah. So when you have an organisation of people that can see the whole length of delivery rather than just their UX part or their data part, they're actually getting skilled across the whole piece. So making people's jobs more interesting, but actually making it a more satisfying role for the people in delivery as well.
Yeah, agreed.
So a question for both of you, and I'll start with you this time, Stuart. What sets apart successful organisations that are already leveraging real value from AI versus those organisations that are not?
So I think from the meetings that we're having with customers and where we are engaging with a lot of the analysts and a lot of the vendors and the OEMs in this space, the companies that are investing properly. So they're not looking at marginal gains through small productivity pieces. They're looking at true business transformation, changing their markets, changing their products to market, changing how they deliver their business, and investing deeply. So really going for sort of larger implementations. They seem to be the customers that are leading. And when you look at the sort of percentages, the leaders in the market are sort of at the top 5%. They're the people making big gains, sort of double-digit percentage growth in revenues and margins and really changing the dial in terms of how they're delivering. The next sort of set of people are the sort of the followers, so the people that are waiting for the leaders to go and prove a business case, prove a use case. They're following and they are bringing up sort of the rear, and then that sort of typically makes up about 60-odd% of the market, and those organisations are investing, but they're not investing heavily. They're sitting back and they're waiting, and I think that's where that $1 trillion growth within the market will largely come from, because the early people have already done it. You've got a big following coming next, and then you've got the laggers. So the laggers, or the people that are a lot more hesitant to go into it, they are sort of sticking with productivity tools, and productivity tools are going to generally give you 1 to 3%. I think the analysts are saying in terms of the productivity growth, which It's a little bit. It's not going to change your organisation, and it's typically done on a user level rather than a departmental or a business level. So it's those leaders that are really changing the dial, and then the sort of the followers that come in behind to actually drive success that way. And then when we are seeing sort of the true leaders, the true people generating that advantage, it is very much more around people looking at how they're generating revenue, how they're generating new business, new routes to market, new customer journeys. People that are then the next level of value down is cutting costs, but at a business process automation and orchestration level. And then, as I say, at the lower end of success in terms of results is typically productivity, because you're not reducing the costs of the business, you're just making people a little bit more efficient.
From a delivery perspective, and I think you're spot on in terms of the categorization of those customers into those buckets, I suppose. The way I would probably look at it from a post, we are now going to go and do something in AI, is around two sets of, I suppose, customers. One that dabble. So, we're going to go and do something. And so they're dabbling around the edges of the elephant in the room. So they're not addressing the real big issue. And those who then, the other group being, yes, we know we have this problem, and how are we going to solve it from a business perspective? So I see those two categories, and obviously there's a third. Let's not bother with anything. There's, as you said, the laggards, but let's take those out. Those are the two groups. And where success is really achieved are by those who are going for it. And it sounds strange that it's all in or nothing. But I think with AI, it's either one or the other. And if you go for all in, the difference is then you're actually now ready to tackle the actual business processes. Because when you're all in, if you think about it, your earlier question around the AI factory, you need to have that in place. You need to have the infrastructure in place. Otherwise, when you're dabbling, you're not going to have the ability to then put into production. So it's a situation where if you've got the all-in mentality, you will have the AI factory. You will have all of the components that are needed to then deliver, and then to maintain it, because again, it sounds easier than it is, but it is not, because the maintenance of these AI processes then requires a whole raft of infrastructure, or certainly infrastructure related services that are automated, because you haven't got the time to go and have a usual standard, let me call my service desk and see where things are going. We're talking milliseconds and seconds to resolve issues and upload and reload things, etc. So that all-in mentality seems to be where, if customers go for it, that is where the most success is.
So just adding to that as well. So I think all in, absolutely. Technology investment, teams investment, absolutely. The biggest challenge when it comes to implementing AI is actually business change. So you've got to be brave enough to do that business change, rather than just try and amend the process or slot the technology in or slot the solutions in. You have to change how you deliver your business to adopt that as the heart of it. And that's very much part of our AI first journey with our own internal capabilities, but actually it's what we're putting into all of our solutions as well. So it's how we will address those challenges for the customers, and it's taking those customers on the same journeys that every organisation, including ourselves, have been on for the last couple of years.
That leads me on to my next question quite beautifully, actually, which is, why is leadership and governance alignment so important to the success of AI programs?
Again, I think there's two parts to that question in terms of sort of the leadership and governance being sort of quite a big subject in itself. So without the leadership, without the actual buy-in of the whole organisation, you're not going to change how your business operates. You're not going to deliver anything that really sort of moves that dial at all. All you're going to end up with is a slightly amended process or something bolted to the side that no one really understands. So it's actually, again, it's taking that whole company on the journey, whole business on the journey, and performing the right change management to make it part of the DNA of the organisation that will drive the success.
this is a complicated topic. It's not easily resolved. It's one of those things that if an organization isn't ready for that change, if they're not ready for that business change, it just makes it much harder. Because to say to someone, we have now AI and this whole set of governance that goes behind the AI solution, let's just say if that's perfect and it recognizes that it's going to deliver value, you then have the people change to say, well, actually now I need to have this solution next to me. So it's almost becoming what we sometimes call whisper agent or something within the business where that solution is thinking on your behalf or helping you to think on your behalf, to almost in many cases saying, I will tackle the low end functionality of what you're trying to do. So it could be, very basic questions, answers, and then diverting towards human in the loops type scenario. And that change is hard for most organizations because in many cases you're saying, we want you to completely change the way you're working, right? And so someone who's got 20 years of experience and been doing this for years and years and years, like, well, hold on, why should I change what I was doing, before? So it's a question of getting those folks to understand that this solution is going to change your entire way of life within the organization. So I think that's one massive challenge that we always face when it comes to the rollout of these solutions. And I haven't even gone into some of the other challenges around that, but this is simplistically, that's a major problem.
Yeah.
I think there's also then the sort of the governance part, which is the second half of that question. When you are working into regulated industries, when you're talking about customer data and you've got the GDPR questions, if you aren't adhering to governance, if you aren't understanding the governance requirements that you're working into, then you're never going to get to production. You're never going to get to release that solution. So again, quite a lot of the effort is put into making sure the data's right, making sure the security's right, making sure that you've got the right traceability around decisions that are being made, enabling trust of any AI solution that you're putting in, that then enables you to go and sort of drive it into that business change. Because without that governance in place, you're going to be pulled apart by any half decent GRC capability.
Yeah. And just on that final governance piece, and again, rather than answering it, I'm going to pose a challenge and sort of think about it in that context, is that a lot of our customers are global customers. So now just governance alone. So first of all, there are multiple governance and rules. Let's just say if it's in finance, we have to adhere to many country regulations. Not just that, but in AI, there are multiple AI regulations that we have to think about. So when we're doing a rollout from, let's say, from the US into Europe or UK, Middle East, and many other locations, we have to then think about what is possible. Where does AI need to be limited, and where AI can be extended. And so if it's a customer that's global, we need to make sure that their customers are having a similar experience across the board. So I think that is a challenge in some cases where we have to go with the lowest common denominator. So we have to then sort of think about, well, this solution has to work across the board. So which regulations do we go with, right? So that is another challenge that comes into these conversations.
That brings me on to the next question, which is really for you, Stuart.
Okay.
Technology and platform selection is absolutely critical to success. And I'm keen to understand what are some of the considerations that organizations need to have in this area.
There's lots. So the technology has moved on a lot. Speed, we've talked about the fact that the technology is now enabling true agentic type solutions. The performance is there. But with that performance comes large costs, and then also large costs around the cooling, the data centers, the hosting of those environments. Organizations are looking obviously at, do they host themselves? Do they capitalize the products? Do they OpEx it and go into sort of the cloud platforms? And that is a real decision point for organizations that are looking at how they commercialize. So what we often see is people looking at their sort of test and dev environments can go to cloud because I'm not worried about performance. I'm not worried about sort of keeping that environment up and running all the time. I can bring it up and down as I need it and use it very efficiently. The difference then when you go into production is you can capitalize this stuff. You can put proper financial rules around it. You can change the way you're buying it to change your commercials at the end of the year. And also you're not paying someone else's margin for hosting it. So at that point, people are looking towards hosting themselves. Now that then brings the data center challenge. So data center space is at a premium. We offer services ourselves to help consolidate in data centers, free up space. But even with doing that, taking what we see as normally sort of 10 to 20 kilowatt data center capacities in terms of per rack, up to 60, 70, even 100 kilowatts per rack in terms of some of the newer equipment. And there will be a point where it gets to a megawatt per rack, and no data center in the UK is going to be able to cater for that today. Absolutely. So when you're going in those sort of directions, you need to then start thinking about specialized data center environments. You're thinking about how do you create that hosting environment, but actually you still need that proximity to data. So that proximity to data and the speed of data, so putting it at the end of a 100-mile connectivity pipe won't give you the right returns on your data. So you're then having to think about how you segregate your infrastructure to feed those environments. So that's sort of the big capacity problem at the moment. The other part of it that we're seeing a lot, especially when we're talking to organisations that are looking to host themselves, and this comes back to the old-fashioned IT question. If I have lots of different technologies, it becomes very difficult to manage. So we're actually looking at driving consolidated platforms, shared platforms, single technologies where possible, or certainly consolidated sets of technologies based on the infrastructures. And we're helping customers at the moment create technology blueprints for AI for that very purpose. So if you're using agentic AI or a generative AI or a data-based sort of solution, predictive AI type solution, it's about creating the right technology blueprints that enable you to satisfy those use cases. And then rather than have one infrastructure or one solution per AI solution, you're then starting to create almost like a bucket of capacity and capability that you load 100 use cases in, and that drives a lot more efficiency.
Why is data and knowledge readiness, and in particular the issue of trust, vital to success? And I'll ask you both that question, but Faisal first.
So data, and I think all of us have been in this industry long enough, and I think day one I entered it, the data challenge was there, and I think it's always been there. I think, and ERP deployments or CRM deployments or whatever deployment, data migration from old system, new system, always has been a challenge, etc. In the past, yes, over a period of time, you can resolve it, clean it, but it's still going to be out of date. But generally, you'll get there. But the amount of data that we used to have to what we have today is enormous. And so capturing that data and then holding that data with all the regulations that we have throughout many countries, many regions will have their own kind of requirements, from Middle East to USA to UK and Europe and God knows what. You're going to get a lot of data coming through into the organization. Holding it and then making sure it's accurate and relevant is another issue that comes on top of it. So, and now, as previously, we had what I would call passive data in most cases when we were doing migrations. But now all of that data is extremely active and needs updating constantly, and the volume of data is enormous. So you then have another challenges around how do we make sure the data is accurate in what we're trying to process. Previously, it didn't really matter. But now with AI, we're relying on the AI solution to learn from that data itself, because that's where the whole crux of the machine learning comes into it. So now inaccurate data, non-trusted data suddenly cause huge issues, because we're not just running a report now and seeing the results. It's that running is using the data to predict what things we should be doing or what could be done, etc., whatever the decision-making process is in that scenario. So it becomes hugely important to have accurate data, accessible data in seconds if we need to be able to make those decisions. And with governance added on top, that challenge is even more complex than it was. Nothing is unsolvable, and that's the nature of the business we're in. But if you don't do it, then this trust is gone, then the AI trust is gone, and then you have a solution that's going to fail very fast, very quickly with inaccurate data.
So adding to that, I think, and really echoing sort of the amount of data held by organisations has ballooned, it exploded over the years, and anyone that's responsible for paying the cloud storage bills, like I am, knows it's going up, and it's not going to stop going up. Quite often, we do see organisations trying to avoid looking at the whole data sets because it's just too big an elephant to eat in one go. People are looking at going, right, okay, what data do I need for this solution? And that's very much a way of actually controlling that level of investment they needed to put into the transformation of their data in order to get in there. Then security, obviously, comes down to trust. If you are putting data into a model and then the wrong people are being able to see it. So, for example, if you were putting your company's data into an LLM and people can then the wrong people in the business can then start seeing everyone's salaries, or it gets posted out to customers. That's end of the project, end of the solution, those sort of environments. So again, it's making sure that your data is appropriately available. And to Faisal's point, it's got to be up to date. If your data goes out of date, your articles that you're using to feed an LLM go out of date, then suddenly your LLM's giving the wrong answers to your solutions. And if that means you've just changed your contracts, changed your policies, or whatever it is, you're going to be on the wrong side of customer actions.
Yeah, I agree with you, and thank you for paying the bills.
Yeah.
Moving away from the data and the technology side of things, people and change and culture is a big component of AI success and any implementation. And how do we make sure that AI becomes part of the way that work gets done on a day-to-day basis?
I think we kind of answered this question slightly earlier, but again, I would add that it is, again, central to your job now, because AI solution isn't just aiding you in terms of understanding a data record or understanding, oh, let me print a report, let me get my understand this. It's actually saying, I'm going to help you understand this vast amount of data that's at your fingertips, and what decisions could you make on this. So it's giving you the ability now to say there are multiple facets to a question that's posed by a typical customer. As I said, it could be in a call center scenario where you've got the ability to then guide your customers that are calling in and taking them through a set of challenges that they're facing. Or it is automated, fully automated type solution where you've got customers coming in and saying, okay, what are my options? Give me my options. Without having to go through a whole raft of other human beings, your AI is able to solve that. So that, of course, needs cultural change and guidance, but also for the individuals that have been doing this something for many years to change with the times itself. And I think that is the cultural change that, with training, with understanding of why this is going to help you in the long run, allowing you to do then more complex tasks that are left with what we call human in the loop type business processes, is where this is going to eventually go. And for those companies who can get there faster, quicker, who can get their people cultural change to go faster and quicker in their organizations, will end up being the winners in this whole process at the end of the day. So those who make that journey, as I said, faster and quicker, you're able to then showcase real value, shareholder value, and that then translates into your company being worth a lot more. I think that's it's important, and that training is not an understatement. Training is going to be critical going forward, because it's a new way of adapting within your own organization, and training cannot just be something from the shelf. It needs to be, in this case, customized to the cultural needs of an organization.
So people and culture are central to an organization. You can't run a business without the people in the business, no matter how good your AI is. So it is about taking the people on the journey. It's about getting the buy-in all the way through. Don't do the project to people, do the project with people. So actually driving a change within the business then becomes very much, first of all, a people change. and a people training and a development activity, and therefore you drive that change for the people into the operations, into the way they work. So it becomes, as we said before, it's AI as the DNA of the organisation, as part of the part of the furniture, rather than just this bolt-on around the side that goes and does part of someone's job for them. It's got to sit in there in line with what people do. And then it gives people the opportunity, the staff the opportunity to do something different, to actually be developed, to actually have a more interesting job. We use the example of the contact centre quite often when we're talking to customers around agentic AI. So if you've got the AI doing the mundane, doing the repeatable task, actually the value tasks that bring value to the customer and drive the customer journey further, give you the opportunity to upsell to that customer or improve your CSAT scores. That's the bit that you've got to focus on to be able to go and drive that solution in. Otherwise, it's just the evil AI that sits in the corner that removes people's jobs, when actually it's the opportunity to drive improved business, improved shareholder value, and drive a very different outcome.
Final question to both of you. How can we create quick wins for AI innovation with measurable return on investment?
If you're not going to go all in, you're not going to get big ROIs. So if you're doing the quick wins, a lot of people decided they were sort of Microsoft Copilot being rolled out. It does add value. It adds productivity to individuals, and we've got customers that have got hundreds of digital agents that are working alongside the staff. Now, for those people, it's valuable. There is maybe not a monetary ROI, because we've said it's 1 to 3% business cost efficiency, but actually you've got people that are now actively using AI products, that are comfortable with AI, that are comfortable that AI can add their values to them and give them back time, or give them more interesting things to do, or take away the mundane. So there is value in just doing that. In terms of actually the sort of dial changing solutions, there is no magic bullet. You've got to think about these things. You've got to go through strategy, you've got to go through planning, you've got to go through governance and make sure your data's right, and that's how you'll give the big ROIs. But yeah, I think when you look at sort of productivity tools and getting people used to using technology, and Bell within our organisation that we've developed does just that. It makes it comfortable to use AI. I think that's the win that I would take from a quick win type scenario.
Yeah,
that's a good question, Mark. Really, I think it dives into the heart of how AI is perceived by an organization. And I think from my perspective and what I've seen being successful and what we've done within Bell is, I would say, have the most creative individuals that you can possibly think of within your own organization, talking to the business and letting those solutions be thought through in a very innovative manner, pushing the boundaries as much as you possibly can to think outside the box. And once you start doing that, then you start to realize what are the possibilities of some of these solutions within the organization itself. Yeah. So what you're then doing is having your most creative individuals talking to the business, who then start to then think beyond the obvious type of solutions. And with AI, you have the ability to go way beyond those normal boundaries that you would do for a traditional solution. I think where it doesn't work is when you start hampering some of those thought processes. And this is where you do need to have the ability to showcase to the wider organization, because in a typical organization, you're going to get the ones who are going to go much faster, much quicker. And at the same time, you're going to have those laggards who are going to say, well, actually, I need to see it to believe it. This is where you do need the innovative or innovation lab, which I've seen in many organizations, and we've built our own, which gives us the ability to really go and push these solutions in areas where we didn't think we wouldn't, that we could do, right? So it's that creativity that you get, and then having conviction in those solutions and saying, well, I'm going to now put this into production.
Yeah.
and it's that conviction, and it's getting everybody on board. And I think the only way you're going to get everybody on board is having that innovative area where you can showcase this is what change could look like. Some people visualize better, some people have an understanding, well, actually, I get what you're trying to do, let's move forward. But to bring everybody on board, which you would need to in this case, you need to visibly show what the solution is going to look like before it goes in, because a lot of the AI solutions are mostly invisible behind the scenes. So again, it's that narrative, that storytelling that you would need to do with the rest of the organization. And then the next set of change that comes in. And if you continue in that path, you end up with innovation at the heart of an organization rather than on the periphery.
You kind of cultivate and celebrate that innovation.
There you go.
I think just adding one final point to that. When you talk about the most innovative people in the organisation, they don't have to be the AI developers. They are across the business. They're the people that understand the business, understand the processes, understand the people that they work around. And I think the important thing, again, coming back to one of the other services that we're seeing a lot of interest in is our training services. So actually providing that baseline of this is what AI is, make sure everyone's on that level set. That's a quick ROI, because that's when you start getting people across the business going, oh, hang on, I know what could do. I know what could work. I've got an idea for a solution. I could have this done for me. And if you get to that sort of point where the business are bringing the ideas, again, we've created now forums within Bell. We've created actually a section within Bell Genie where you can submit your ideas for AI solutions. Again, that's about encouraging the whole organisation to come forward rather than just waiting for the guy with the propeller on his head in the corner to do it for you.
Yeah. I agree with you, and the inquisitive mind is really where what we're looking from the business, and with prompt engineering and some of the latest features that are now easily available, whether open source or on platform. You don't need that deep technical engineering to be able to create something. And I think you and I were experimenting just recently at a conference where both, we were building a bot and we built it within 5 minutes itself, but just with prompt engineering. So again, that gives you the ability to...
Wasn't Terminator bot, was it?
No, it wasn't a Terminator bot, but it gives you the ability to create solutions that the business requires. And I think it's making it easier for the business to say, okay, let me think it through. But again, as I said earlier on, and we've discussed this, you have to have the infrastructure behind it.
Yeah.
And if you leave that business user without any support behind the scenes, they're not going to get very far. They'll get a few bits of productivity going and that's it. And so it's that all in, push through and make sure the infrastructure is available for them to put into production.
Thank you, Stuart. Thank you, Faisal. It's been a very interesting discussion with you today.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you for having us.